Well, welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
I'm Chris Clements. It's great to be here.
So,
for yet another, what we call the rant.
The rant.
What's the big news this week, do you think?
Big news. Well, Joe Manchin.
Joe lays down the gauntlet.
It's pretty interesting. It's what's really interesting to me is you've got some Democrats and more progressive sorts that are saying, you know, if you're not going to do this, then you should just switch parties. Well, if you switched parties, they're effed. Because all of a sudden, Kamala is not the deciding vote anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't understand the tactic. I don't understand the strategy of trying to box a Joe Manchin or a Kirsten Sinema, who we're friends with, into this position where they have to continue to say, hey, I believe in the integrity of the process. I believe in the institution of the Senate. Stop asking me about the filibuster. Oh, and by the way, some of these bills that you want us to sign off on, my constituents really aren't keen on. They need to be changed.
Right.
And I think, and this is something, be interesting for us to talk about in terms of our time in DC. I mean, we know intuitively, this is why the press is so disingenuous. They're hammering Joe Manchin, they're hammering Kirsten Sinema. But meanwhile, there's at least eight other senators, both Republican and Democrat, sitting in the corner saying, you guys just keep taking those arrows for us. So we're not, maybe about five Democrats who are on the hot seat.
Yeah.
And you just, Joe, you and Kirsten keep doing that because we can just kind of slither off into our offices and not be bothered when they know that they're not for this, they're not for Senate Bill 1 and they're not for torpedoing the filibuster either.
Right.
In fact, Byron York had a great article this week on his Daily Memo about how many Democratic senators sent a letter to Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer last year or 2 years ago, decrying the efforts of then President Trump to torpedo the filibuster.
It is all about the politics of the moment. And really, you just have to go back to 2013 when Harry Reid nuked the filibuster for district and appellate judges. And that came back to bite the Democrats in the ass when McConnell used it for the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And so if they really want to go down that track, just all you have to do is think forward, okay, so they're going to try to jam a bunch of stuff through, and then there's going to be a whiplash reaction by the public, and Republicans take control of the Senate in 2022, and then a Republican wins the presidency in 2024. Oh, and by the way, the House goes Republican in 2022 as well. So then you've got all Republican control in 2025. A President DeSantis, do they want no filibuster with a President DeSantis and a Republican Senate and Republican House?
Yeah, I can't imagine they would want anything to do with something like that. And I think Mitch McConnell, to his credit, has made that very, very clear about what strategy they would pursue if the shoe was on the other foot.
Right.
And it wouldn't be anything that the other side, the opposition, would like. And they would be screaming as well. So it's all just sort of, I think it's all theater.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's all theatrics.
I don't think anybody's really serious about it, especially when you have 10 senators, both Republican and Democrat, meeting weekly, and this is no big secret, to try to find bipartisan solutions to a lot of different bills that are coming or bills that really need to happen, whether it be infrastructure or anything else.
Yeah, it's I don't know. The thing that strikes me, well, I don't know why they would blow up the filibuster for H.R. 1 when there's going to be so much of that law that if it were to pass and be signed into law, is going to end up as being undone by the courts because it's unconstitutional.
Sure.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense that they are putting that's the hill that they're going to die on. But nobody, like you said, it's theatrics, and maybe the question is really and some people in Washington have raised this. Are they doing this because they really want to implement the policy, or are they doing this because they want to run against Republicans on this issue for stopping this? And
I think Republicans are fine running on this issue. I think they're more than prepared to run on federalism, on the fact that the states have the right to implement their own elections, to manage their own elections,
both
in the state level and the local level. And the federalization of election law is on its face unconstitutional.
Right.
So I think Republicans are fine with it. I think so much of it is theater because of ideologically where the Democratic Party finds itself.
Yeah.
And so you have this idea that you're going to pressure Joe Manchin, who hails from West Virginia, which used to be a blue state, and now is deeply red. I mean, it was actually this West Virginia, Donald Trump carried by a larger margin than any other state in the union.
I think there's only one other. There might have been.
That might be,
I think North Dakota might have been even more for Donald Trump. But the point is West Virginia's in the top tier of Trump supporter.
And so for
states.
Joe Manchin, he's probably laughing at all this. I get all this attention, but I still have to go home, 3 hours down the road and meet my constituents. Oh, and by the way, you're going to strip me. There was this talk yesterday of stripping Joe Manchin of his committee assignments. And I mean, that's James Jeffers 2.0, right?
Well, and don't forget that this is not bad for Joe Manchin.
No.
For him to stand up to the left is definitely helping him at home.
Sure.
He is a Democrat, but he's in a Republican state, so that's not a bad thing.
Well, he could easily, and I've kind of thought that this would happen this way, is that they're going to get to budget reconciliation in September. They're going to have all this. They're going to have to pass some sort of either continuing, CR or something. And Schumer is either going to pile everything into it, or he's going to try to do it piecemeal, which I think is much harder for him.
I think they piled.
And
I think it's going to be.
And I think if they pile everything into it, and it's a bunch of stuff that Manchin's constituents and about 4 or 5 other senators' constituents don't want, I think it makes it very easy for Joe Manchin to say, I'm going independent. I'm not going to become a Republican, but I'm going independent.
Well,
and then I will caucus with the Republicans. And then you have a different dynamic.
So here's why I don't think that's going to happen. Is because
we're disagreeing on something.
We're disagreeing on something.
Great?
It's great.
I mean, your perspective on this is actually great.
He has way more power where he is right now.
Sure.
Because if he's the 51st Republican, then it only takes, any Republican could be the power broker, or any 2 Republicans could be the power broker at that point.
Yeah.
So I think he'll stay as a Democrat, and he will continue to take the arrows, and he will feign frustration, and he will tell people, stop asking me, but he'll be winking and nodding, saying, every time you ask me and I say no, my numbers go up at home.
Yeah.
Theater.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm more popular at home than ever.
Yeah, exactly.
And go ahead and primary me.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking about that the other day.
But he's not up until 2024, right?
Yeah.
So
he's got some time. He's got a long runway.
Well, let's put it this way. If the Republicans take control in 2022, he'll probably become a Republican at that point.
It'll be timely for him to do that.
Politicians do what is best for them. They're first and foremost self-interested.
That's pretty much what Richard Shelby did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a lifelong Democrat from Alabama, and the tide began to turn, and he's like, I'm going to go with the tide. And certainly in my state, I better hurry up and go.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that's when, if he's going to switch,
And he'll
maybe not this
be able
fall,
to
maybe next
easily
fall.
make the argument that I didn't leave the Democrat Party left me, because they've gone so far to the left.
Yeah.
At the base. I mean, Joe Biden used to be like one of the most moderate senators in the Senate, and now he's one of the most liberal presidents we've
Yeah,
ever had.
I mean, hailing from a very, a blue but low tax, low business tax state.
Right.
Delaware exists because people, businesses incorporate themselves in Delaware. There's a reason why.
Exactly. All right. What other news?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you talk about the tack to the left, because there was some interesting news this week about one of our favorite subjects, and that is the AOC, otherwise known as Sandy Cortez to her friends. So before she became Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was a bartender named Sandy Cortez, who interviewed for the job with Justice Democrats.
Right.
And they ran against an incumbent congressman and won.
Yeah.
More power to them.
A lot of people don't realize she beat Joe Crowley, who was probably in line to be the next speaker at that time. Had Pelosi, he was, the up and comer, and Democrat primary voters were very, they don't turn out in big numbers in a very blue district, because it feels like not much going on. She won with 11,000 votes.
Yeah.
11,000?
Yeah.
She got less than the typical state legislator.
Yeah. So, I mean, since that time, she's become this sort of media phenomenon. And she tweeted last week that she had gone down to Puerto Rico, first time since the pandemic, to go visit her Abuela, or her grandmother. And she tweeted back pictures about the way her grandmother was living, which had a leaky ceiling and some other things. And that's horrible. It's not right. And but she said that it was a failure of federal assistance and a failure of the Trump administration. And those policies can be debated back and forth. But what was interesting about the whole tweet is that a guy by the name of Matt Walsh, who has a podcast for the Daily Wire, says, what's really a travesty about this is you left your grandmother down there in squalor and didn't move her up to your $1 million condo just 2 blocks from Nat Stadium. And then, to try to help her Abuela, he started a GoFundMe page, which raised $100,000 like in 4 hours. And then he got he and AOC were going back and forth over Twitter. And then he got a letter, an email from GoFundMe saying that the family of the recipient is declining the funds. But he touched on something that's absolutely, the hypocrisy of something like this, and that is, AOC's former job was a bartender, and she's in the lane she's in. She's a quote unquote socialist. She's pushing the Green New Deal, and she's doing whatever she's doing. I always have this joke that because she's a product of Justice Democrats, that maybe she has a little earpiece in her ear, and they just tell her what to say, and then she just says it in terms of whatever her time is on, and I think that's in this case it's probably a completely staged tweet, and she got sort of called out on it in a really unique, funny way. But the hypocrisy really is the fact that she does live in a condo just 2 blocks from Nat Stadium. She drives a Tesla. And why wouldn't she just move her grandmother to her $1 million condo, which actually I have a buddy who lives right down in the same condo. And it's not a cheap place. It's really nice.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that they rejected the money is fascinating. And I guess they didn't want to get owned. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's all theater.
Yeah.
It's all theater.
Nothing's real
Nothing's
anymore.
real. Politics it's completely lost its meaning.
Well, and that's a great pivot to the next big news.
It is.
Which I think
More
will
news.
more news, which, we have a treasure trove of Dr. Fauci and his emails going back to January, February of 2020. And some really interesting takes on gain of function research in Wuhan and funding that research and America being part of that. And a lot of different takes, early takes on mask wearing and social distancing, all of which ran contrary to what we've done for the last year.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, I don't know that we'll ever really know everything in the hindsight. Whether it was a lab leak or it's likely a lab leak, in my opinion. What's the real science on masks, on social distancing, standing up, sitting down. We've talked about being in a restaurant, and it's like, oh, well, I'm not going to get it because I'm sitting down below where the virus resides.
Yeah.
It's stupid. And the amount of misinformation that the guy who's supposed to be the expert in all this, put out was just astounding.
Yeah.
And it just misdirected so many different things and created so many different problems because he's not an economist. He's not, his job is to say this is what the virus is doing or can do or will do or how it's going to end.
Or what we think.
Yeah.
Because at that time, it was more about here's what we think.
Right. And, never did he, we now know in hindsight that if you're fat, you're going to be that's a real serious problem.
Yeah, obesity
was like a huge driver, and vitamin D deficiency. So instead of saying exercise, eat well, get outside, get some sunshine, it was lock yourself in, order in, all this packaged food, whatever. It just, the whole thing is just a farce. It's the Fauci farce.
Well, I've termed him as Dr. Faustus, and Dr. Faustus is a play, and it tells about basically a doctor selling his soul, and if you look at the last year, I think there's a dramatic argument you can make of Dr. Fauci with as much nuanced explanation that he's given both to the media and then to the Congress as what we should or should not be doing, all of which change with the wind. You have to question his motivation, and you have to question, after a year. I mean, the most dramatic thing that happened. It's one thing not knowing about the intricacies of the virus and what it'll do or not do early on. I think that's fine. It's one thing to ask us to shut down for a week or two, and I think while we figure some things out, I think everyone was on board. But then this elongated emergency, which governors, both Republican and Democrat, have embraced. It's the devastation that has brought to our country. And just the infighting amongst the things you were talking about, social distancing, masking, everything. The question is, has it been worth it?
Right.
And I think from his emails, you can absolutely conclude, no.
Right.
No, none of it's been worth it. What would have been worth it is to protect and identify those who are most affected by the virus, the elderly, and those who have conditions that the virus attacks, heart conditions, obesity, diabetes. Mm-hmm. These are the things, that were at the forefront from the beginning that we knew. Shutting down schools, kids wearing masks at schools when they're not strong carriers. They even if they get COVID, they're barely affected.
Right.
And here we are a year later, and the devastation is beyond belief. And there are things that he knew about the gain of function research also. I think there's a group of scientists that were really trying to protect their own behinds, their own asses on this.
Clearly a cover-up.
Because of the funding that had gone to the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Right. And again, this was, in the hindsight, it was all theater for the most part. Like when he's wearing 2 masks after being vaccinated and admitted to Rand Paul, it's for show.
Well, he was the one who said to Rand Paul, "Oh, there you go with the theater again." And Rand Paul's like, "No, but
you're the guy with the mask, or 2 masks on after being fully vaccinated."
But it is theater, and then to not have any clear guidance. And you and I have talked about this a little bit for people who've had COVID.
Right.
I mean, do you need 1 shot, maybe? Do you need any shots? There hasn't been much clear guidance, and now it's coming out because of multiple studies that are being released, which is great because I've had COVID. My whole family's had COVID. And eventually I'll probably get vaccinated, but I'm not in any hurry because I don't need to be. I've got natural immunity.
Right.
I've got T-cell immunity higher than people who haven't had
vaccine.
COVID.
Yeah.
So all of that and living the way we've been living the last year just makes it's unfathomable.
Well, we're going to, the real devastation, we've seen the economic devastation. The follow-on devastation is going to be the mental health crisis that we are in, and it's only growing.
Yeah.
Including drug use, opioid overdose in California. I don't remember if it was a county-specific thing for LA or if it was California in general, but they've had somewhere double the number of opioid overdoses than they did at this point last year.
Yeah, but look at what that governor's doing. Okay. You know what my kids call governor? Some governor dum-dum. They just want to go to Disneyland.
Right. We all do.
And they can't go to Disneyland.
I just want to go to Disneyland.
Because of all these arbitrary rules that they've put in place.
So we're going to Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. And here he is. Everyone's looking at this arbitrary date, again, that he's going to open up the state in June 15th. And then he decides, nope, I'm not going to do that. And so people, in terms of the mental health portion of what you're talking about, that just contributes to it.
Yeah.
And the devastation to the service sector in California. And that's why you have people moving here, moving to Texas, moving to the Dakotas, Idaho, Florida. I mean, California people are packing up. Mm-hmm. And it's not just the people who have means. It's
right.
Everyone.
Yeah. In a lot of cases, it's people who don't have means.
Yeah.
In part because housing prices have gotten so crazy, they can sell it and buy a really nice place somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thanks, Dr. Fauci.
Really appreciate Dr. Faustus and all he does. We get canceled for that, maybe.
Yeah, whatever.
No, but what's great now, though, there's a bright light in that. Is that a lot of scientists who have been kind of sidelined and been yelling and screaming about this stuff for a while are now being sought out to get their perspective on the Wuhan leak and why they thought that, because we were all not supposed to talk about that for the last year. That was taboo. That was misinformation. And it wasn't really misinformation. It was just simple logic.
Right.
And logic would suggest that if you're doing gain of function research, if we are funding gain of function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and there's a leak and there's a new pandemic that looks rather suspect, is one of the emails that was given to Dr. Fauci. That could be man-made or weaponized. Maybe we should look into that.
Yeah.
Until we figure out that that's not the case.
We have to. We for the sake of our national security, and for our ability to deal with this when it happens again.
Yeah, I think one of the great things that President Biden actually could do to show bipartisanship, to bring the country together in a proactive way, is get all the leaders of the House and Senate together. Say, we're going to convene a bipartisan committee and we're going to get to the bottom of this, and it's going to lead wherever it's going to lead, and because the country deserves it.
So
And I don't think that will happen, but I think that would
be a great idea.
That would show seriousness. It would show an understanding of, what is, bringing some closure to what's happened over the last year. But we're going to convene a committee to look into the origins, not just from a intelligence standpoint, but just for the benefit of our national security.
Yeah.
And for the benefit of the healing of the country.
Absolutely.
And I expect you guys to work together on this because the country deserves it.
Well,
but that won't happen.
We can only hope. All right. Good news.
Yeah, big news. Big news of the week. I'm sure there'll be more.
Yep. Thanks for listening.